everyone! Hey everyone, I'm Chelsea White and today we are making a funfetti edible cookie dough cake. So this cake has a lot of amazing components to it. You're going to see we're using a lot of different techniques and it really is a fun funfetti cake. So I have here 3 cake layers that I've made. These are 8-inch rounds and I've added sprinkles to them to make them funfetti. So I'm going to be stacking these and we're also going to be adding in some discs of edible cookie dough, which I've frozen just to make it a little bit easier to stack everything. So that's everything that's gonna be going into our cake. We have some American buttercream here that we're gonna be frosting with. And we're, of course, just like always, we're building on a 10-inch grease-proof cake round. So I'm gonna spread a little bit of buttercream on this just to secure our first cake layer. You don't need a lot here, it's really just to help it stick in place.
So what makes cookie dough edible cookie dough?
That is a wonderful question. So to make edible cookie dough, you're really just not adding the eggs to it, and you're also going to pasteurize your flour. So that's important because sometimes flour can have risks to it, and you're really safest if you do heat it up to a certain temperature just to make sure that it's really safe for eating raw.
So you heat up dry flour?
Yep, and you can do it in your microwave or in your oven. And I actually have the full recipe for my edible cookie dough up on Chelsweets.com, and I think we shared the link in the comments, so if you want to learn more about that or how it's made, you can head over there and check it out and make it yourself too. So I'm now going to add on one of my discs of edible cookie dough, and I've used some saran wrap to shape this, and we're just going to carefully place this on, and when I say place, I just mean throw, onto our buttercream. So usually I like to freeze these fully before I add them, but I let them thaw a little bit today just because we do need to cut into this cake in like 15 minutes. But if you do have any of your layers cracked a little bit, it's not a big deal because you can just kind of push them together and you're still going to get the same effect when you cut into the cake.
And is it okay if you don't have time to freeze the cookie dough to shape it yourself?
You can definitely, you don't have to freeze it at all, but it does freeze pretty quickly, so I think in general most people will be able to do it. But it's not necessary by any means, it just makes the process a little bit easier. So now that we have added our layer of edible cookie dough, I've added some buttercream around the edge of it. I'm going to continue to stack. So you guys know that I normally like to make my cake layers with 4 layers, but because we're adding edible cookie dough, it really gives this cake a lot of height. And even using 3 layers, this is going to be a really tall cake. So if you wanted to, you could alter it to make it 2 layers, you know, whatever you prefer in terms of looks and how big of a cake you want to make. But for me, I just decided to use my, my classic vanilla layer cake recipe, which I added some sprinkles to. And I made it in 8-inch pans and I just made 3 layers with it. So they're a little bit thicker than normal, but I think that it's better to just have 3.
Is there a different size jimmy that you use?
I just use what I think is a classic rainbow jimmy that I order online in bulk. But I know there's tons of different kinds out there. So this is the kind that I use. It's really beautiful. It doesn't have any brown sprinkles, which is why I love it so much, because it just is really bright. So when it bakes in the layers, it gives it a lot of color. So I really enjoy this blend, but pretty much any blend would work. Just making sure that they are jimmy so that way they don't melt too much into the batter as it bakes. So now that I've got my second layer of edible cookie dough on here, I'm going to pipe around that perimeter again. And I don't think I mentioned that when I freeze these layers of edible cookie dough, I actually use just a 7-inch cake pan that I lay saran wrap over and then I press the cookie dough into it. And I actually use another 6-inch pan to press it down and make it nice and uniformly flat. And then I just wrap it up in saran wrap and freeze it. So it's really easy and it gets you these really beautiful uniform discs. So I highly recommend that. It really does make the whole process easier. Another alternative, if you think this might be a little bit too much cookie dough for you, which I don't think there's such a thing as too much cookie dough, is you could chop it up and add little bits between the layers just to make it not quite as intense. I usually like to make cakes that are a little bit over the top, so I really love the idea of an edible disc cookie dough. But if that's not quite your style, you can definitely just add in chunks between the layers.
This is definitely a cake that you only need a thin slice.
Yes, this is a huge cake, super indulgent, but luckily I have my 2 tried and true friends here today, Robert and Mitchell, and they're going to help me eat this cake once we're done.
I like this cake because you can switch off between the bites that you're eating, between cookie dough and cake.
It's definitely, every bite is pretty fun.
And I do think that all cookies should have buttercream on them.
Right? Kind of like almost like a cookie sandwich.
Yes.
But it's really dangerous though making edible cookie dough in like large quantities like this, because inevitably there's always leftovers, you know, it's sitting around. I froze some of it into bite-sized pieces, and I always find myself going into my freezer and eating it. It's just like irresistible. So hopefully if you make some of it, you have pretty good self-control or a lot of friends to share with, because it goes quickly.
Those would be good to have on hand and like watching movies or...
Yeah. I made my little bites, well, they're not quite little, they're pretty big. We're going to be
big.
placing them on top of the cake.
Those are like standard cookie size.
Yeah, they could, if you bake them, they could literally make a cookie. But it'll make sense once we decorate the cake and you see where we'll be using them. But if you wanted them for snacks, you could definitely make them smaller, you know, like maybe a centimeter across, just to be the perfect bite-sized little piece.
So just a quick reminder that these are edible cookie dough bites.
Yes. So we added edible cookie dough layers between the cake, and we're going to be adding on some little bites on top of the cake once we have decorated the sides. So first I made sure I just filled in between all of our cake layers to make sure that we've covered all those edible cookie dough discs that I just talked about. And now I'm going to add on a little bit more. We'll smooth it out, and then we're going to cover the sides with mini chocolate chips and sprinkles. So again, a lot of sprinkles, a lot of cookie dough, very over-the-top cake. But it's really amazing. This cake actually is inspired by my sister. It is her birthday actually today, what am I saying? It is June 6th. It is my sister's birthday, and she had one request for her birthday cake, and it was that it involved edible cookie dough. So I said, yes, anything for you, Kaylee. So this cake is inspired by her, and I'm gonna send her a piece so she can enjoy it.
Yeah, I know this cake sounds very sweet, but actually, I don't think it's as sweet as other cakes.
It's actually, that's a great point. So because the edible cookie dough, I don't think it's as sweet as my buttercream, and I add, as you guys know, a lot of buttercream between my layers. So I think that it's still a really rich and filling cake, but it's not quite as sweet. I totally agree.
It's a nice balance.
It is. If you can call this a balanced cake. But again, you guys, I think if you're eating cake, you're like want to enjoy it. You're there to have a sweet experience, and this cake will definitely deliver that. So I'm just going to smooth out this overhanging top a little bit, just by using my bench scraper to very carefully just kind of drag into the center. I'm not applying a lot of pressure. I'm really just trying to just pull that frosting right into the middle of the cake. Are there any questions out there?
The viewers want to know how you're going to ship that piece of cake to your sister.
Secrets. Some things stay a secret, you guys. It'll be more evident. You guys can find out actually if you watch my Insta story. Tomorrow you can find out how that's going to happen. But it's a secret for the time being.
You know what I bought yesterday that are very good?
What?
Japanese Oreos.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
They're thin.
Like Oreo thins?
They're
What's
like,
your thing?
They're like Oreo thins, but they come in little packets, and the ones that I got are tiramisu flavored.
That sounds so wild. That's like so many different things at once.
Very good.
That reminds me, actually, I made a really similar cake to this last year, and it was a funfetti Oreo cake, and that was actually really good too. But this year, we went all out with the cookie dough. All right, so our cake sides are pretty smooth, and I think it's always best practice, you guys, to add a crumb coat to the cake. But today we are about to cover this in sprinkles, so we just added on one kind of medium thick layer of frosting, and now we're gonna get to the really fun part, which is covering it in all those rainbow jimmies I just showed you. So I'm gonna slide my cake over, and I have out just a big baking sheet, and it's really helpful to do this process in a baking sheet, because if you don't, you will cover your entire floor in sprinkles, which is not the end of the world. You can always sweep them up, but it just gets really messy. So I highly recommend using a baking pan for this if you have one. So I'm just taking some sprinkles in my hand, and I'm gently pressing them into the frosting. You want to add just enough pressure to let them stick in the frosting, but not enough where you're denting the frosting. So I'm going to slowly...
These are mixed with chocolate chips.
Yes, there's little mini chocolate chips in here. So as you guys know, like I always love the decoration of my cake to match the flavor. And so when you look at this, I want you to know like there's some edible, and once we finish it, you will definitely know. There's edible cookie dough in here and quite a bit of sprinkles. So nobody is gonna not know what's inside this cake once we're done.
I People are asking, do you have an Instagram? Where on social media can they follow you?
Of course, you guys. If you want to see more of my cake creations, you can also follow me on Instagram. My handle is @Chelsweets. And I actually have a YouTube channel as well where I share a lot more in-depth tutorials on how I make different cakes. And my channel is just called Chelsweets also. So you can check me out on pretty much any, I think, social media platform. And you should be able to find me just by searching Chelsweets.
Is there a specific place where you ordered the jimmies from?
I get mine on Amazon. These are from Sprinkle Planet.
Sprinkle Planet. That's a great name.
It is. It really is. I think I've tagged them in some stuff before, if anyone.
Just imagining what Sprinkle Planet would be like.
It's funny because I actually used to work with somebody who now, their family owns the company.
Oh.
So it's a very small world, taking me back to my days in audit and Ernst & Young. So
Can we
funny.
go visit Sprinkle Planet?
I actually would love to go visit a sprinkle factory. That would be like one of the highlights of my life.
I watched a video of how they make sprinkles, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, you can make your own too. You just pipe them. I think it's like confectioner, sugar, water.
Yeah, but the extrusion process of.
Yeah, I think that in a factory it's like way more impressive than when you're just like piping lines and then breaking them using a bench paper. But I've never made my own sprinkles actually, but I've always wanted to. So that's kind of. You guys are inspiring me now. I'm gonna.
Tumbled.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool process. So
But
I'm
you've
just.
made everything else in the cake, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. So everything else in this cake is from scratch, you guys. But I do like to make everything from scratch, so maybe, got some extra frosting there. Maybe going forward, I'll try that for next time. Goals, sprinkle goals. It's hard to beat these sprinkles though, you guys. So I just kind of nicked my frosting here, so I'm just gonna press it a little bit to put it back into place. But as you guys can see, this is a really great way to decorate a cake if you sometimes struggle getting super smooth sides, because once you add all the sprinkles on, you really cannot tell how smooth your frosting was. So it's a really great way to decorate if you're still getting comfortable with that. Or if you just want kind of a low-key cake decoration style, you know? If you're just trying to enjoy yourself. Or if someone really loves sprinkles, because let's face it, this cake has more sprinkles on it than I even knew we could fit onto a cake. So I'm gonna set aside my baking tray now. I think we used just the right amount of sprinkles,
We
you
did.
guys. I'm very impressed with myself. I almost always put too much in the bowl, so good. Okay, so now that we have our sprinkles in place, we're also adding a little chocolate ganache drip. So I'm gonna swing around to the other side so I can see what I'm doing as I'm adding these drips. So this is just a little bit of chocolate and heavy cream that have been melted together so that we can get this really beautiful drip going. So we'll do a little test drip here and just see how far these are running so that we can adjust if we need to heat up our ganache a little more or let it cool. Hopefully not let it cool because we're doing this live. But those look pretty good, so I think I can make mine a little bit longer by just squeezing in the bottle over the same spot to make the drips run a little bit more. So this is always quite a bit tricky when the cake is not chilled, which is right now. But in general, if you chill your cake before doing this, it's pretty easy to get your drips just the right length. And I actually have a full tutorial on YouTube sharing all of my tips and tricks to get the perfect drips on a cake. So I highly recommend watching that because this is going to be a little bit of an altered version so that we can do it live. But we're also going to have some fun drips just because we have all these sprinkles on there, so the drips kind of have to navigate their way through the sprinkly side of the cake. It's a little bit more epic than a normal drip cake. But I kind of like it because it gives it more, I think, of like an intense and playful look. I think drips in general are already playful, but this just like always looks so epic. There's something about ganache drips on top of sprinkles.
I think sprinkles and chocolate is the best combination. I never pass it up when I get my ice cream.
That is a great point. This kind of does remind me of like an epic ice cream cone. Another thing I want to mention, you guys, is that today I'm using a drip bottle to add on my ganache drips. I guess it's not a drip bottle, it's really a plastic bottle. I just call it a drip bottle. But if you wanted to, you could totally use a spoon and just have your ganache in a bowl. It actually can be a way to have more control over your drips and get more of a free-form look, but it takes a lot longer, so today I'm just using a squirt bottle because I want to keep this process rolling. So as you guys can see, our drips have run quite a bit on the ones we did at the beginning of the process. I think these ones will continue to drip as we let the cake set. So now that we've got those in place, I'm gonna add a little bit more ganache just around the top of the cake. And then all that's left to do is add on our edible cookie dough balls. We can call these balls. I feel like there should be a better name for that. Massive pieces of edible cookie dough on the
Morsels?
I think they're too big to be called morsels though, don't you? I think they're like past that.
Bites.
Yeah, something like that.
Hi, Steven.
Steven's watching? It's pretty fun. Hi, Steven. Steven's my fiance. All right, you guys, so now that we have this border on, if you wanted to, you could cover the whole top of the cake. You really can do whatever you want with this. I'm gonna start adding on my edible cookie dough balls. So I've tried to make these like similar sized, but obviously I like rolled them by hand, so they're gonna vary a little bit. If you wanted them to be exactly the same, you could use like a mini cookie scooper to make sure that they're really nice and uniform, but I kind of like the way it looks when they're a little bit different size. I think it looks really handmade, and I think it shows the love more. I guess we could say they're like rustic, rustic cookie dough balls, right? So I'm just gonna keep placing these around. As you guys can see, these were frozen earlier, so they're nice and firm and they're gonna keep their shape well. And I actually like eating them when they're a little bit frozen too, when they're chilled. I think they're the best. But they're good at room temperature too, so it's whatever.
Ooh, you should cover them in ganache for later.
Oh, I was like, how much chocolate can we fit on this cake, Robert? No, that would be good. Well, Robert, we can experiment after this. We can add some
Or magic
ganache
shell.
onto this. Or magic shell. Ah, okay, so see, I think that we need a little bit more in the top of this, so I'm gonna add a little bit of ganache and some sprinkles. Maybe I'll do like a little ganache squiggle. Whenever I have like ganache in a bottle, I always get a little out of hand like this. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm gonna grab a spoon quickly so that I can add some sprinkles to the center of this. Just gonna do a quick little border on the inside because all of you know that this cake clearly doesn't have enough sprinkles on it yet, right? I really do think this kind of completes the look though. It pulls it all together. Okay, now we can cut into the cake. So this thing is epic, you guys. It has so much cookie dough in it. But I taste tested it this weekend when I made my test version, and it really is delicious. Like, it's one of my favorite flavors. I would definitely say it's top 5. I'm gonna swing around so I can cut into it and you guys can see. I'm gonna be sure to cut in between my little cookie dough balls. And we're gonna see if we can cut through our chilled cookie dough layers. We can, yay. Push that back in place. So I'm gonna cut a really big slice so you guys can see the inside. Again, I'm sharing this with my friends. Don't worry, I'm not gonna eat this whole slice myself. It's so delicious though, I probably could if I really tried.
Ooh.
So as you guys can see, we have our beautiful funfetti layers, our really thick discs of edible cookie dough, and of course a little bit of buttercream between there as well. I think I'm gonna lay this down. This is a really big piece of cake. It's pretty epic. I'm gonna smooth
Sounds
this
like a
out.
challenge.
It is. Are you up for it, Robert? You think you can handle it? All right, you guys, so that is the inside. This is the outside one more time. I hope you guys enjoyed this funfetti edible cookie dough cake as much as I enjoyed making it. I live stream every Wednesday around 8 p.m., so if you guys enjoyed this, tune in next week. You can also see more of my cake creations on Instagram and YouTube, which both of my channels are called Chelsweets. And the recipe for my frosting, my cake layers, and of course the edible cookie dough are all up on chelsweets.com. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great rest of the night, and hopefully I'll see you guys again next week. See ya!